on the military and civilian personnel programs in the Department of Defense and the military services in review of the administration's defense authorization request for fiscal year 2023. This is the subcommittee's annual personnel posture hearing that establishes a foundational record for the committee of the department's full range of activities concerning matters affecting service members, their families, retirees, and the department's civilian workforce. And it provides the department the opportunity to discuss their personnel policy priorities. To our witnesses, welcome. Thank you for appearing. And we will have two panels today. The first panel consists of officials from the Office of the Secretary of Defense who cover the full range of military and civilian personnel programs. The Honorable Gil Cisneros, Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Ms. V. Penrod, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Dr. David J. Smith, Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, and Ms. Elizabeth B. Foster, Executive Director of Force Resiliency, Executive Director, Office of Force Resiliency. Same thing. The second panel will include the Senior Personnel Chiefs of Military Services, Lieutenant General Gary M. Brito, Deputy Chief of Staff, G1, Vice Admiral John B. Noel, Jr., Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, N1, and Chief of Naval Personnel, Lieutenant General David A. Ottinyan, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Manpower Reserve Affairs, Ms. Gwendolyn R. G. Filippi, Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force for Manpower Personnel Services, and Ms. Patricia Mulcahy, Chief Human Capital Officer, United Space Force. Before I continue, I want to recognize Ms. Penrod, who has appeared before the subcommittee on a number of occasions, but for whom this hearing will be her last. She is retiring imminently, I'm told, after more than 5 decades of service to the Department of Defense. This includes 16 years as a senior executive in OSD and 35 years in the Air Force as both an enlisted airman and an officer working on behalf of our service members, their families, and the civilian workforce who supports them. Thank you for your service, Ms. Penrod. At this hearing last year in May, I began by noting that our country has been in a state of continuous war for nearly 20 years, and that with the impending withdrawal of combat troops from Afghanistan, we were closing one chapter and beginning another. In the years since, we have indeed seen a new chapter unfold, with continued resurgence of great power competition and Vladimir Putin's unjustified, unprovoked, and unwarranted war on Ukraine. Coupled with the persistent effects of global pandemic, increasingly sophisticated cyber and other asymmetric threats, and the disruptive effects of ecological degradation and changing climate, the need for a highly trained and capable military and civilian workforce within the Department of Defense and throughout the federal government has never been greater. We must commit to meeting these challenges by developing, fielding, and maintaining the world's most capable workforce. I'm going to submit the rest of my statement for the record, and I turn it over to Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Penrod, given your future plans, I look forward to your just unabridged and unbridled responses to our questions, but congratulations again. The 2023 National Defense Authorization Act will coincide with the 50th anniversary of the creation of the all-volunteer force. But I think it may be more accurate to describe the military as an all-recruited force, because it takes a large amount of resources to attract sufficient numbers of high-quality Americans to military service. To put it bluntly, I'm worried we're now in the early days of a long-term threat to the all-volunteer force. A small and declining number of Americans who are eligible and interested in military service. Every single metric tracks the military recruiting environment is going in the wrong direction. In most cases, we're seeing the worst numbers in the last 2 decades. Only 8% of young Americans have seriously considered joining the military. That's the lowest number since the late 90s, and it's 50% lower than it was during the deadliest days of the global war on terror. Perhaps most alarming, today only 23% of Americans are even eligible to enlist. That's down from 29% only a few years ago. We're fighting a war on 2 fronts right now. On the one side, we have a shrinking number of Americans who meet the minimum qualifications for military service. On the other side, those who are qualified have historically low levels of interest in putting on a uniform. This two-front recruiting war is already affecting our military readiness. The Army plans to shrink by 12,000 soldiers next year, not because they want to, and not because they were told to. The new National Defense Strategy does not call for a smaller Army. The Army is cutting in strength because there are simply not enough recruits to go around. And the other services are experiencing similar struggles at varying levels. Ensuring our military is sufficiently manned is the most important job this subcommittee has. I intend to spend most of today's hearing asking our expert witnesses what you intend to do and how we can help address these growing challenges. Thanks again to the witnesses for appearing before the committee. I look forward to your testimony. And Madam Chair, I do think we're going to have a vote in the middle of this. Are we going to do a tag team so that we can keep things moving? So excuse us if one of us have to leave the room momentarily. Thank you.
Very much, Senator Tillis. I'd now like to call on Secretary Cisneros.
Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, and members of the Personnel Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. We are here to discuss the Department's greatest strength, our people. We are proud to represent the 3.3 million service members and DOD civilians who defend our nation every day and their families who serve alongside them. One of Secretary Austin's earliest messages to the force made clear that taking care of people is a national security imperative. This administration has shown both in their words and actions that DOD will invest in our greatest strategic advantage. This commitment is evident in the FY23 defense budget request and our personnel policy efforts. While many personnel priorities are reflected in the budget request, I will focus my remarks on a few priority areas. First, recruiting, economic security, support to military families, Independent Review Commission on Sexual Assault in the Military, or IRC, and suicide. To build and maintain our global competitive advantage, we must recruit quality applicants in an ever-changing landscape. The Department is in fierce competition for skilled, relevant, and innovative talent. The labor market, exacerbated by the effects of the pandemic and the military-civilian divide, creates a challenging recruiting environment. You will hear from the services later today, but my team and I are working closely with them to leverage all authorities, resources, and tools to address these challenges. The pay raise of 4.6% in the budget request will enable recruiting. It will appropriately compensate our workforce and support the overall economic security of service members and their families. I cannot stress this enough. The economic security of our service members is critical to readiness, and in total, the current military compensation and benefits package is fair and compares favorably with the private sector. To remain competitive, we must keep pace with private sector wage growth, which this pay raise does. We are addressing rising housing costs by temporarily adjusting the basic allowance for housing in high-cost areas, and thanks to your leadership, we are implementing the basic needs allowance with the first payment scheduled to go out in January 2023. Our military families are vital to the readiness of our force. We are broadening employment support to military spouses by expanding the Military Spouse Employment Partnership Job Search Portal. We are working with all 50 states to improve state laws to ease occupational license portability. Likewise, the Department is addressing access to child care by increasing staff hiring, applying the $15 per hour federal minimum wage to child care workers, and providing service members fee assistance to offset the cost of in-home child care. Taking care of our people goes beyond compensation. We must eliminate sexual assault and harassment to preserve readiness and support a resilient and cohesive force. The entire department continues to work to implement the IRC's recommendations. Our budget request of $489 million will enable us to invest in prevention to eliminate those wrongs. We are committed to making a cultural change at every installation worldwide to tackle this problem. We are also steadfast in our commitment to suicide prevention and the well-being of service members and their families, especially in light of the recent incidents involving those assigned to the USS George Washington. They are tragedies, and we are working to learn more and to ensure the Navy has every resource they need. We are taking a public health approach, targeting the various underlying risk factors and mental health stressors. We are enhancing protective measures such as social connections, coping skills, and safety. And we are working to address the shortage of mental health providers, which is a nationwide problem. This includes providing care for anyone who needs it, whether this is in our direct care system or using our private sector network. One last issue I would like to highlight are efforts in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space. Enhancing DEIA across our department maximizes our ability to recruit and retain top talent. Secretary Austin recently designated me as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the department. In this role, I will continue to bring about long-term changes and work to support the factors that promote racial, ethnic, and gender diversity and inclusion. I will take steps to ensure our total force has an opportunity to achieve their professional goals and is a cohesive and ready force that reflects the diversity of our nation. I shared a few of our major initiatives in my remarks today, but I would also like to mention an approaching milestone. Next year, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. When this country eliminated the draft, we did not imagine the success the all-volunteer force would have in creating the most educated, professional, and lethal military force in history. As we look to the next 50 years, it is imperative that we do not take what makes our military unparalleled and unmatched for granted. Our people. Thank you for your continued support of our service members and their families. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Cisneros, Section 1506 of the 2022 Defense Bill requires you and the DOD Chief Information Officer to assess the feasibility and advisability of creating a National Cyber Academy to train future civilians and military personnel for federal service in cyber information and related fields throughout the federal government. The assessment must be completed by this fall. Do you believe that the National Cyber Academy would help us obtain for civilian or military service the cyber talent we need to meet national defense objectives over the next 2 decades? And while creating a National Cyber Academy is a long-term enterprise, in the near term, what do you think of creating an ROTC-like scholarship to service program for civilian students throughout the nation, partnering with appropriate colleges and universities in exchange for a civilian service commitment?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Cyber is one of the areas that I know all the services, both on the civilian and the uniform side, are in, as I mentioned in my remarks, in a competing for talent, with the private sector. We need more of these individuals. We are trying to recruit the best and the brightest. I've spoken with the Chief Information Officer. They actually have lead on this report. We are there to support them. But we think anything that we can do that'll bring more people into government service, hopefully within the Department of Defense as well. We are looking at all opportunities and anything that we can do that would kind of help improve that and make it better.
Thank you. Ms. Foster, the Department of Military Services continue to implement the recommendations of the President's Independent Review Commission on Sexual Assault in the Military, particularly those that address prevention, victim care, and command culture and climate. Most of these recommendations do not require legislation. Nevertheless, we expect the Department to implement these recommendations as quickly as possible, including within the reserve components. Please provide us with an update on the Department's implementation and the timeline for expected completion. And do you expect to implement every one of the IRC's recommendations? And if not, which are still under review?
Senator, thank you so much for that question. As you know, implementing all 82 IRC recommendations is a priority of Secretary Austin's and all senior leadership at the Department of Defense. In the interest of time, I'd like to provide a few highlights on the prevention work that we're doing and the response workforce. So on the prevention workforce, as you know, one of the key recommendations of the IRC was to stand up a dedicated and specialized violence prevention workforce that would look at addressing not only sexual assault and harassment, but also suicide, domestic violence, child abuse. And so one of the things that we've done is established the prevention workforce model, which is essentially the infrastructure that will support this new workforce, which we're building from the ground up. And when we look at this workforce, we have to think, where are these personnel going to be? What special skills will they possess to do their job? What kind of training and continuing education do they need? What kind of credentials do they need to ensure that this is truly a professional and standardized workforce? So that's what we're doing on the prevention side. On the response side, we're working really closely with the services to redesign how we staff, resource, and professionalize our response workforce so that we can ensure that our victims are getting all of the care and support that they need. That includes things like eliminating collateral duties so they can focus exclusively on this work. It means looking at taking this out of the chain of command so that there's no bias in the process. And we're working very closely with the services on developing those workforce studies right now that will allow us to implement this. And I'm happy to provide you additional information about other recommendations or your staff at another time.
Thank you very much. Dr. Smith, the Personnel Subcommittee recently held a hearing on suicide prevention and behavioral health issues. At that hearing, we heard from both DOD and outside expert witnesses about the shortage of behavioral health providers in DOD and in the nation as a whole. We continue to see increasing suicide rates in the services, and we hear from constituents about problems accessing behavioral health care, both for service members and their families. This has become particularly acute during the pandemic. Dr. Smith, what can be done to increase access to behavioral health care? What is DOD doing now and planning on doing in the future to address the shortage of behavioral health care needed by our military personnel and their families? We also continue to hear that some do not avail themselves of behavioral health services because of the stigma attached seeking that type of health care. What is being done and what more can be done to reduce stigma of seeking behavioral health?
We're also adding psychiatric PAs along with nurse practitioners and licensed mental health counselors, family and marriage therapists. We've also started reviewing all initial appointments to make sure that we're matching the needs of the individual to the right level of provider to make sure that they're not mismatched once they make their first appointment. We've also, as I think you're aware, significantly increased telebehavioral health and have a goal to increase another 63,500 visits over the next year. Now, telebehavioral health is clearly contingent on the consent of the individual and that the provider thinks that it's the right modality, but we think that that's going to help increase availability. I will point out that most of our MTFs meet the access to care standards that we've set. And actually, internally, we have a standard of 15 days. Most are aware of the 28-day but on average, across the system, we're running at about 13.6 days. But there's clearly exceptions that occur on a monthly basis at various locations, and that's part of where we hope the staffing model will help on that. You mentioned the issue of stigma. We're working with PNR and the rest of the department to look at all of our instructions to make sure that we review them and remove any destigmatizing language that may be in them. And I hope the fact that there is an increasing demand signal for behavioral health is an indication that some of our efforts are actually working, but I might defer to some of my other colleagues to see if there are additional issues to add to that.
Senator, I'll just add on the stigma. That is something that we have really been focusing on. The Deputy Secretary holds the DWC, the Deputies Workforce Council, where this has definitely been a topic that's come up for discussion, where, you know, we are trying to convince commanders and everyone not to overreact when somebody comes up with a problem that and says, you know, hey, I need help, I need support. That's not a reason to take away security clearance. So we've been discussing this. All the services are on board. It's something that we'll work towards to really kind of get it out there to really destigmatize it and really mean what we say is like mental health is health, and that people should have the support to come forward when they need to discuss their mental health.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Again, thank you all for being here. Ms. Foster and Secretary Cisneros and I spoke about this in my office yesterday. With the IRC the implementation, originally there was a shorter timeline. Senator Gillibrand was gracious to have a 2-year implementation timeline. But in each of the service lines, this is going to be a complex process. And I know, Secretary Cisneros, I believe you said that you would be having a program office or a program plan more or less put in place over the next month or so. It's less of a question and more of an encouragement that as you get that plan together, I think it would be important to report back to this committee your progress and any of the milestones that are slipping to the right, the reasons why, so that we don't have to be reactive when you come before the committee and report that maybe you've ran into a few challenges for making the timeline, and then what more we can do to potentially facilitate any of the problems or challenges you may be running into.
Senator, absolutely. We would be more than happy to engage with you on this. As you said, it's quite complex. We're implementing 82 recommendations that cover sort of the full spectrum of the department. But I think what we've done is we've built accountability and evaluation into the process to ensure precisely what you described, that we don't fall off track. One of the ways in which we've done that is we're building an outcome metrics evaluation report, which will allow the department to track progress on each of those recommendations, recognizing that for some of those recommendations, there's, it's not just done, not done. There's many data points along the way. And what we're doing with that report is that will then come forward to the Deputies Workforce Council, which is chaired by the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That will come forward to that group on a quarterly basis. And anywhere that we are falling behind, anywhere where it looks like we're off track, that gives the senior leadership of the department an opportunity to engage with all of the services and say, hey, what's happening here? Why aren't we making progress? Do you need additional resources? Do you need additional authorities? And I think we would welcome having that conversation with Congress as well. You've been critical partners for us on this, and so we'd like to continue that conversation.
Thank you. Secretary Cisneros, the DOD Equity Action Plan that was issued a few weeks ago, can you give me an idea of what specific programs or actions are going to follow as a result of that action plan?
Thank you for that, Senator. Look, I think that we want to ensure that everybody has opportunity, regardless of their sexual gender, the color of their skin, that they are able to, given an opportunity within the Department of Defense, to achieve and to succeed, and also to do this within our DOD schools as well. To celebrate the diversity of our families, of our service members and their families that serve in the Department of Defense, to make sure that we celebrate the many cultures that make up the department. But our equity plan is really about making sure that there is opportunity for those that want it and to go out there and are going to work to achieve it, and really creating that environment where we celebrate the diversity of our force, and that we are getting out there to ensure that we know a diverse and integrated force is going to make a stronger war fighting.
I understand the objective. I think it's laudable, but I'm getting more into the implementation. I mean, could we foresee quotas, or how exactly would you implement this?
No, sir. We have no quotas. There's no idea or thought of quotas. Again, when I say it, it's about creating opportunity to make sure that everybody has a fair shake and that everybody is given the same opportunity to succeed. That is really what we're going after, and that's what I've always talked about what diversity is. Diversity is about creating opportunity, and that's what I'm working towards within the Department of Defense as we move forward with this.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Smith, I had this discussion with Secretary Cisneros in my office yesterday. I think we've got an inherent conflict when we talk about removing the stigma. On the one hand, we are rightfully asking men and women to come forward, seek help, and provision care to them. On the other hand, and you've heard me state my concerns with some of the inflows of potential recruits, you have a potential recruit come in who may have at some point in time prior to seeking a career in the armed services have behavioral health challenges, maybe anxiety, or been administered drugs. It's my understanding right now that's a disqualifying event. Is that true?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It depends on, I would need to have more specificity as to the particular issue. We certainly allow folks that have had issues in the past into the services. If they are on medications, we require a certain period of stability on those medications. But I can certainly provide, for the record, more detail.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. I just, you know, I'm just wanting to make sure we have consistency over the life cycle from the point in time somebody's considering entering service to the point in time somebody exits and transitions to veteran status. And I think those are just slight tuning of the dial that would be helpful for the overall challenge that we have with removing the stigma and making sure people get the treatment that they need. And Secretary Cisneros, if I get a chance, I wanted to go back to a discussion we had about child care, but we have two members here. I may have an opportunity in another round. Senator Warren.
Thank you very much. So we're here to discuss the Pentagon's budget request for personnel costs. In other words, the part of the budget that pays for the people who make our military run. And some of those people are federal employees, but some of those people are contractors. Now, studies have shown that outsourcing can result in the Pentagon paying double or even triple what we'd pay for federal employees to do the same job. The Defense Business Board recommended cutting those contracts to help the department save $125 billion. Now, contractors are always going to be part of our defense workforce, but making good decisions about when to outsource requires good data. Secretary Cisneros, your office is required by federal law to help track data on the cost of contractors used by the Pentagon. So let me just start with the basics. How many contractors work for the Department of Defense?
Senator, thank you for that, but regrettably, I do not have that information with me, but I can take that for the record on the number of contractors that we have.
Is it a publicly available piece of information?
That I'm not sure of, ma'am. I would have to get back to you on that.
Well, let me put it this way. I can't find it.
Yeah.
And I look hard on your website. I call people. I try to figure this out. And I think that's the problem. The law explicitly requires your office to develop guidance to track this information. And I don't know how we can justify the kind of spending the Pentagon asks for if we don't even know basic things like how many people we have on contract and make that number publicly available to all of us. There's no doubt that you're required to collect it. I'd just like to see it and see it reported. Now, we also know that it can be incredibly expensive when the department outsources its work for services like administrative support, for food services, for deployed troops, for weapons maintenance, or even for management consulting. And the costs for these have grown enormously over the past 20 years, so that last year the department spent $214 billion on service contracting. One of the big ways that the department estimates future costs is through 5-year spending plans that lay out expectations for how much different parts of the Pentagon are going to need in various areas. So, Secretary Cisneros, how much does the department expect to spend on service contracts over the next 5 years?
Senator, it's my understanding that we don't project contractor costs the way that we do with our military and civilian workforce requirements. However, we must take, I believe you're right, a total force approach and kind of looked at contracted services. And I can commit that I'll take this concern back to the comptroller and the COPE to ensure that it's addressed.
Well, I appreciate your doing that. You know, it shouldn't take somebody asking this question. This should just be part of the planning that's already baked in. We can't have good planning if we're not looking at long-term costs. And I got to say, 5 years doesn't just seem like hugely long-term, but at least a start in the right direction. I think that taxpayers and those of us who do oversight should know how much money the Pentagon expects to spend on costly areas of the budget. And I think this committee should know that. And I'm going to be following up on requests for information. I appreciate your willingness to bring this forward. Look, we have a defense industry where these contractors have a long history of lining their pockets at taxpayer expense. And if we're not collecting the data and making smart decisions, then we're going to just continue to see runaway spending without more effectiveness in making our military work. So thank you very much.
And Secretary Cisneros, if you're able to provide that information, I think it would be interesting to stratify it between sort of ongoing long-term positions, project-oriented, special services, things that are unique to a specific project or outcome that roll over. I think that's a better way to look at it because, one, you can understand that would continue to be contracted. The other one, you can look at whether or not that's a valid basis for bringing it inside. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Smith, can I start with you? Earlier this week, the VA announced that it would presume service connection for 9 respiratory cancers that were resulting from or potentially connected to burn pit exposure. This committee, as you may know, held a hearing on this topic back in March. Can you give me the DOD's estimate for the number of individuals who would qualify for the presumption of service-related connection? Do you have any sense of that?
Thank you for the question. I do not. Oh, thank you. Sorry. I do not have an actual number. I know that the definition is rare means 6 per 100,000, I believe. But I would have to come back. And yes, they did. It's 9 conditions related to high particulate matter.
And that brings the total that the VA has now designated as presumed service connection to what?
To 12, I believe, relative to particulate matter. Because sinusitis, rhinitis, and asthma was also made presumptive, I want to say 3 months or so ago.
Okay. Could you come back to me on the numbers, such as could you look into that and get back to me for the record?
And the idea would be for us to predict what we think the numbers would be.
Yeah, given the likely exposure since 2001. Give me some sense of the scope of the universe that we're looking at here.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Ms. Penrod, shifting to you, that this committee heard earlier this month testimony relating to the tragedy of service member suicide. I know the department's been attentive to this, but the GAO has reported a statistically significant increase, I'm sure you know, in active component suicide from 2015 to 2020, and that's true across all of the services. Let me just ask for your view about why this issue persists despite DOD's attempts to address it.
Senator, I am going to defer to Ms. Foster.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Her portfolio.
Sure. Go ahead, Ms. Foster.
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And let me just say, first off, that these are tragedies that have absolutely no place in our force, and we need to continue our concerted efforts to get after this. I think the reason that this issue continues to persist is suicide is the result of a number of different complex factors, so psychological, environmental, social, behavioral. And as a result of that, there is no one single fix that we can have to address this. And, you know, this is not just a problem within the Department of Defense, it's a problem within the civilian community as well. But we are taking a public health approach to urgently get after this issue, and we're doing that through a few different ways. One of the ways in which I'll highlight is we are standing up a dedicated and specialized violence prevention workforce that is intended to address those risk factors that we see that exacerbate this issue and enhance some of the protective factors that are critical to getting after this.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. What do you think, in your view, the weak points are in the department's current efforts to address this issue?
Senator, I think that the science is evolving rapidly on this issue, and so we are following the emerging science and data on this to address this and taking that integrated primary prevention and public health approach to this issue. We absolutely have more work to do, but we are moving quickly to take these steps.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking more about this. I mean, it's a huge problem, as you say. It's unfortunately a growing problem. It does span both the civilian and the military worlds, the service worlds, and it's clearly something that we need to address in both of those contexts. So I look forward to working with you more on that. Mr. Cisneros, Mr. Secretary, if I could just shift to you in my remaining moments here. As you might imagine, I have received a lot of communication from constituents who are concerned about military discharges as a result of the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Can you tell me how many service members within each individual service and across them have been discharged as a result of the vaccine mandate?
Thank you for that question, Senator. You know, ensuring that all our service members are ready and able to deploy and be part of our fighting force is an important thing. I know it's important to the Secretary and a requirement that he's made. In regards to the number of people that we've been discharged because of the COVID vaccine, I do not have that exact number with me today, but that's something I can take back for the record.
Great, thank you very much. Can you also find out what percentage across and within each service were issued as a general discharge under honorable conditions rather than an honorable discharge? Can you find that out for me?
I can look into that, Senator.
Okay, great. And maybe you can tell me this. How does the department evaluate the character of the discharge resulting from the vaccination requirement?
Well, right now, Senator, those that are being discharged, if anyone is being discharged because of refusal to take the vaccine, they are getting either it's an honorable or the next level below that. And that was dictated by the last NDAA that we follow, and so that's what we've been doing.
And how do you distinguish, though, between those two categories?
That, sir, is up to the services. They process the discharges. They are the ones who make the decision on the individual basis as to what's going on and why it's an honorable or why it's not an honorable discharge.
But surely, given that this is a very widespread issue and the numbers are pretty large, there's some uniform criteria, I would think.
Sir, we have our we have our policy, the same policy for waivers and for whether it be medical or for religious waivers, and that has been in place for a while now, and that is the policy that we have gone to the services and told them to make sure that they are following these procedures. With that, I think Ms. Penrod could kind of give you a little bit more detail on that.
Sir, as with any discharge, a service will look at the conditions around that discharge, so it's not always straightforward. It could be other circumstances with an individual case, and that's why we need to, it would be the services who would have to answer that, why they would have a certain number of honorable versus general discharges.
But am I right in thinking that when it comes to this issue, I mean, this distinction between an honorable discharge or the general discharge under honorable conditions, as it relates to COVID-19, there's some set of uniform criteria that are governing these decisions, right? I understand that you have to make a case-by-case evaluation, but there are a lot of these cases that are presenting the same basic sets of facts.
Yes, but the services are looking at each case individually, so that's what they do. They review these cases, and they look at all the circumstances of the cases. That is not something we would be able to do at our level.
Well, I understand that. I'm just trying to get the information. So I understand. Listen, I'm a lawyer. I mean, courts assess cases on a case-by-case basis. That's what litigation means. But you do it according to a standard rule. You don't just make it up as you go along. I want to know what the rule is, what the criteria. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And we do. We do have procedures in place that have been there that govern the waivers, and then as far as discharges go, there are procedures in place and instructions that guide that, and that's kind of what the services are following.
Can you get me that information?
Sir, if I may, sir, so it's really a two-step process. If it's a religious accommodation, for example, it's up to the department to determine whether or not that's a sincerely held belief. In most cases, that is being passed. The individuals, I have a religious reason for not having the vaccine, that's clearly passed. The next step is, what is the impact to the health and welfare of the service? Is there a safety issue? So that's the next standard that they look at. For the services, that's the standard that causes the concern. for the safety and welfare of the service. And so those are the standards. Those are clear in policy. The procedures themselves are different by service, and that's what we're reviewing currently.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any other questions. This panel, mine's already been asked and answered. But I will say this, my office, I've got 5 military bases in my state. My office has been overwhelmed with phone calls and letters. And some of these letters that I read are, I mean, break your heart about religious and health-related problems. I would say, as Senator Hawley said, that, you know, we need to get some kind of relief from this. We need to get somebody some answers so we can give our people answers, because it's all up in the air. And, you know, people don't like their questions not answered, especially when it's their livelihood. So I would appreciate the same information you're going, Secretary, for Senator Hawley, and so we can pass that on to our constituents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We could provide that, Senator.
Thank you. Both of you have an opportunity for a second round if you have more questions. I'm going to just ask one. Just last week, the Army unveiled an expansive set of new policies aimed to create one of the most consequential sets of quality of life improvements ever for military parents, including expanded leave and making it easier for pregnant soldiers to continue their careers. This new policy includes a 12-month exemption from onerous military requirements such as postpartum body composition, physical fitness testing, postpartum dress uniforms, deferment from training and deployments, among other things. This new policy also authorizes up to 42 days of convalescence leave after pregnancy loss, and authorizes parental leave for birth parents in the Army Reserve and Army National Guard. Secretary Cisneros and Ms. Penrod, what's your view on this newly announced Army policy, and will you consider requiring the other services to adopt a similar policy?
Senator, I think when I saw the message that they were coming out with this, I thought it was great, and I think it's something that we definitely encourage. You know, each service is different. Each service is trying different things. I know the Navy for a while has granted leaves of absence where service members could take time off, I think up to like 2 years, you know, from active duty and then come back after that. But we are for supporting anything that is going to allow you know, improve our quality of life of our service members and to make it better for them and to make it more family-oriented for them.
Yes, Senator, thank you. What we do is when a service announces a policy, that is a very generous policy. And again, we look at the support it provides the family. We always work and meet with the other services and look at, well, how would you do this? You know, what are the constraints for you to implement the same? As Mr. Cisneros said, each culture is different. And how would that impact readiness and mission of the service? So this is something I think each individual service can speak to. But yes, when we see a great policy or something that helps our service members, we absolutely look at how can we expand that to the other services. But once we have that information, if it looks like something that all services can support, we usually do put that in policy. You know, we'll try to put that in policy.
Great. And just one question for Dr. Smith. This is something that Senator Tillis and I have worked on. Last year's NDAA contained a provision requiring an independent analysis of recent changes to the Autism Care Demonstration Program after families and providers reported a myriad of concerns and disruption in care. What's the status of the NASEM analysis? Will the analysis be complete before the end of the ACD on January 1, 2024? And what will happen to the beneficiary services when the ACD ends on January 1, 2024?
Highly support and think is very reasonable to do. It is supposed to be, we want it to be done clearly before the end of the demonstration, and relative to what will happen at the end of the demonstration, that's still internal discussions and a decision has not been made on that. So I hope that answers your question.
Just one more, back to the vaccination issue. Prior to last year's NDAA, and you referenced the change in in discharge status and decisions that we legislated. But prior to that enactment, how many service members do you know were dishonorably discharged because they were unwilling to get the COVID-19 vaccination?
Senator, I don't have that number in front of me right now. We can get that for the record, too. That may be a better question for the services when the next round as well.
You will get it for me, though.
I will get
Thank
it for you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panel. Your testimony is extremely helpful. And if you want to supplement it in any way, you have about a week to do so. Thank you so much, and we'll invite the second panel up.
I guess so.
Welcome to our second panel. I'll just invite you in order of your seating. So Lieutenant General Brito, you're first, if you'd like to start us off.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the men and women of the United States Army. I have submitted a statement for the record, and I would like to highlight a few points from it now. The Army's #1 priority is its people, our soldiers and Army civilians, families, and veteran soldiers for life. Nothing is more important for our combat readiness. Our personnel programs and initiatives are focused on promoting a culture of cohesiveness, dignity, and respect, and within a safe environment where every individual can advance as far as their talents and skills and desires will take them. Talent management initiatives, modernization programs, and policy are transforming the Army's personnel systems. Ongoing 21st century talent management initiatives and actions help us attract, acquire, and retain a diverse and talented force from across the nation. Our nearly 280,000 Army civilians are an integral part of the Army team, providing unmatched talent in critical areas. To further support them, we have expanded professional development and educational opportunities, have extended our SHARP services to all Army civilians as well. Personnel readiness also means creating an installation and environment that allows our soldiers and their families to thrive. The Army is committed to quality of life priorities that include quality housing, barracks, child care, youth services, and meaningful employment for our spouses. Resiliency programs and initiatives aimed at harmful behaviors and supported by Congress are critical to help us combat sexual harassment, sexual assault, and factors that contribute to suicide. The Army's SHARP and suicide prevention training curriculums have both been updated. In addition, the Behavioral Health Pulse tool was fielded last year to provide leaders visibility over many facets of behavioral health. Other initiatives, such as fatality review boards, support from our cohesive assessment team, improved leader training, and more, are helping to address the issue of suicide across the total Army. The Army Soldier for Life program continues to support soldiers, veterans, and their families. The retired soldiers are important to the Army family. Soldier for Life is working to ensure that states and territories are aware of inbound transitioning soldiers and their families. The people of the United States Army, these men and women who serve our nation both in and out of uniform, along with their families, are our strength and what makes our Army great. A diverse, talented, strong, healthy, and resilient force is the most important indicator of our overall combat readiness. Putting our people first as a priority and a philosophy, will continue to drive everything we do and continue to contribute to the quality of life and combat readiness. Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, and members of the committee, I thank you for your generous and unwavering support to our talented soldiers, civilian professionals, and their families, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, and distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and to talk to you as the Navy's Chief of Naval Personnel on our personnel policy programs and initiatives. It's my distinct pleasure and privilege to represent the sailors who are on watch 24/7 in every corner of the globe, above, on, and below the surface of the seas. The demands of strategic competition now more than ever require that we remain well ahead of our adversaries who are persistently challenging our traditional warfighting dominance. To do this, we must continue to enhance our asymmetric advantage, our people. We must consistently attract, develop, and retain the world's most talented and skilled Navy combat force. While we remain committed to attracting the best talent our nation has to offer, we are beginning to witness an increased competition for talent. As was mentioned in the first panel, last month the unemployment rate dropped to 3.6%, while wages continue to grow, resulting in a very strong labor demand in all markets nationwide. While we are trending to meet our FY22 accession mission at the aggregate level, we will do so by reducing the delayed entry program from historic norms, which will be challenging to sustain. To remain competitive, we will continue to leverage our e-talent teams, our large-scale digital recruiting presence with our Forged by the Sea marketing and advertising strategy, and we do reach all zip codes and will continue to not only leverage this, but also enlistment bonuses in our relentless effort to attract the diverse and skilled talent that we need. We continue to invest in trained, resilient, and educated sailors who can outthink, outdecide, and outfight any potential adversary. In particular, we're developing our sailor talent through initiatives such as Ready Relevant Learning, Warrior Toughness, and our Culture of Excellence campaign. Ready Relevant Learning fundamentally changes the way our sailors train, transforming an industrial-era training model into a modern, agile system with tailored career-long learning continuum for each sailor. Warrior Toughness is a holistic approach to developing the tools needed for sailors to optimize their performance in even the most stressful circumstances, and our Culture of Excellence promotes a force-wide environment of respect and resiliency for our sailors to thrive in the face of personal and professional adversity. Driven by the overarching goals of maximizing warfighting excellence and readiness, the Navy-wide campaign is directly led by the CNO, who leverages a Navy leader development framework which employs a data-driven look across all of our 17 warfighting communities with a regular drumbeat. Building upon the retention gains of the last few years, we're committed to keeping the right talent and experience in the right pay grades and specialties while remaining mindful of the current economic trends and how they influence our sailors' career decisions. To enhance retention, we continue to optimize our talent management systems to provide greater flexibility to sailors in career choice, development, training, and assignments. Our detailing marketplace assignment policy, which will replace our existing sea-shore flow model, offers a wide range of monetary and non-monetary incentives to sailors, primarily in sea-intensive ratings right now, to encourage them to serve longer where we need them most at sea. Commitment to continued investment in our sailors is necessary to sustain the fleet, and we appreciate your strong support on our compensation to include vital special and incentive pays and bonuses, which now more than ever are needed to target specific skills. And finally, transforming the Navy's internal personnel business processes remains a top priority to ensure we're delivering world-class HR services to our sailors and their families. Again, I thank Congress for your support there. I remain inspired each and every day by our sailors. I know that you do too, and each and every American can be proud of them and their families. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Vice Admiral. Next is Lieutenant General David Ottenian, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Manpower, Reserve, and Affairs.
Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss your Marines. I've submitted a written statement, so my opening comments will be brief. We have decisively stepped out on a talent management design and modernization effort to increase the lethality of your Marine Corps to fight and win when called upon by the nation. Talent Management 2030 was released in support of the Commandant's Force Design Plan. Accomplishing the Corps' force design will not be possible without highly skilled, mature, and mentally tough Marines. These strategic plans are interdependent and foundational to the success of the Marine Corps. The end product will be a force that is better equipped to fight and win in an increasingly high-tech, complex operating environment. The statutory authorities that Congress has granted has streamlined some of these efforts, and we thank you for your support. Other initiatives will require more study and take time to implement, and we remain committed to getting this right. The way we recruit and retain our focus areas in Talent Management 2030, and while we are on track to make our session goals, this is arguably the most challenging recruiting year since the inception of the all-volunteer force. Looking forward, we will need to be innovative and adapt to these challenges and be agile in our approach. I would like to highlight our commitment to the implementation of the recommendations from the Independent Review Commission approved by the Secretary of Defense. Working closely with the Department of the Navy and the Office of the Secretary of Defense, we are moving out quickly to establish the Office of Special Trial Counsel, as well as additive preventive workforce and enhanced victim care and support improvements. We will continue to keep Congress informed as we make progress. My final point today is that taking care of Marines and their family remains paramount. We continue to invest both in prevention programs to reduce destructive behaviors across the force. Family readiness programs like parental leave, child care, spousal employment, and our gold standard exceptional family member program are essential to the readiness of our force. We know that we recruit Marines, but we retain the family. I'm proud to represent your Marines, their families, and our civilian employees, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to hear from Ms. Gwendolyn R. D. Filippi, Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force for Manpower, Personnel, and Services.
Chairman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to talk about our airmen and families. Winning a 21st century fight requires adaptable, resilient, innovative airmen comfortable leading and flourishing as members of a diverse team. The Air Force will leverage a 21st century tailorable talent management, force development, and care solution ecosystem to develop airmen who can operate and succeed in a complex environment. Our airmen and families are our greatest competitive advantage. We buy things, we invest in people. Over the past year, the Department of the Air Force continued its focus on providing the absolute best care for our airmen, guardians, and their families, while taking all steps necessary to create an inclusive environment where everyone has the opportunity to reach his or her full potential. The Department recognizes that despite strong efforts over many years, we have not made significant measurable progress in preventing or reducing the number of sexual assault cases. We remain committed to efforts to combat sexual assault in the ranks and are open to piloting research or data-informed prevention strategies that can reduce and eventually eliminate sexual assault from within our ranks. This year, the Department of the Air Force began implementing the Independent Review Commission's recommendations, increasing our full-time response advocates, adding additional oversight to support victims, and increasing advocacy and support to sexual harassment victims. In response to the Department of Defense's concerning suicide trends, the Department of the Air Force established prevention priorities for 2022 that align with the White House strategy for reducing military and veteran suicides and nest within the prevention strategies established by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. While we recognize risk factors for suicide are highly personal and often a result of interconnected issues, our analysis supports those leading indicators identified by experts in the field to include relationship issues, stigma towards seeking mental health care, and access to lethal means. We have taken targeted measures to address these areas of concern. In order to provide support to airmen who may be hesitant to come forward, the Department of the Air Force launched online family suicide prevention training, and we have trained over 20,000 family members. Additionally, in order to address access to lethal means, we are working towards building a culture where safe storage is commonplace, putting time and distance between an individual in distress and access to lethal methods such as firearms or medications. Recognizing a resilient environment for our families is also important. We strengthened efforts to manage our child care programs more effectively while increasing capacity within the system. Further, the Department continues to assist airmen, guardians, and families with multiple solutions to support financial readiness and opportunities to promote food security across the force. Thank you for the recent Basic Needs Allowance legislation to better support the well-being of those for whom food insecurity may be an issue. The Air Force is balancing manpower readiness and force modernization amid tight fiscal demands. Our military end strength reductions in FY23 are commensurate with proposed force structure and divestitures. In order to execute the planned FY23 manpower reductions and not face involuntary force management actions, the Air Force likely will end FY22 between 1% and 2% below the congressionally mandated end strength. Although the Department continues to experience high retention overall, we are seeing challenges in critical specialty capabilities we need future airmen to have. Therefore, we have focused on deliberate programs to attract and retain military and civilian cyber talent, as well as other STEM areas of expertise. We appreciate the talent management flexibilities you have provided to assist us in these efforts. To enhance our talent pool, our United States Air Force Academy has taken measures to ensure all cadets take courses with focus on cyber. In addition, through the Civilian Premier College Intern Program, we recruit approximately 500 diverse students annually who have met our goal that 75% hold STEM degrees. We understand it is equally important to execute retention programs for these critical skills, so we continue to utilize different career and developmental flexibilities as well as targeted monetary incentives in an effort to retain this talent. The Air Force achieved its FY21 recruiting goals, and we hope to do so again in FY22, but we may miss goal based on increasing competition for talent as well as continued decline in propensity and eligibility of young Americans. In conclusion, success against a pure threat demands we maintain asymmetric advantage in the quality, education, and training of our airmen, and we are investing accordingly. We have made progress, but the Air Force still has work to do before we have an environment that allows all airmen and their families to reach their full potential. We continue to pursue every practical solution that moves us closer to making this environment a reality, and we look forward to continuing to partner with Congress in our endeavors to do so. I thank you for your continued support of your Department of the Air Force and your airmen, both military and civilian, and the families who support them. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Patricia Mulcahy, Chief Human Capital Officer, United States Space Force.
Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Tillis, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the leadership and support you have provided to the United States Space Force, our guardians, and their families. It is a privilege to come before you today alongside my service colleagues. The cornerstone of our Space Force is our people. We are purposefully building a service of guardians capable of securing the space domain, integrating deterrence, and enabling the joint warfight today and into the future. To attract, recruit, and develop this talent we need, we crafted and published the Guardian Ideal, our human capital strategic plan. Our approach is grounded in our values of character, above all, connections through unity, commitment to the profession, and the courage to be bold. The Guardian Ideal modernizes our approach to recruitment and retention, fosters connection among guardians, puts a focus on enabling a digital force, and integrates wellness and resiliency. With our small numbers, we believe it vital to strengthen the diverse teams comprised of both uniformed and civilian guardians with a tailored talent management approach. We are competing for talent with the well-paid and dynamic space industry. Part of our vision to grow and sustain our active and reserve force is by creating a new space component that provides greater flexibility for our guardians and commanders in the field. This approach could ensure our members do not have to choose between their military careers and their personal lives by encouraging continued participation. The space component would extend the continuum of service, enable us to recruit and retain the exquisite, highly technical force we need in an efficient and effective and fiscally sound manner. Implementation would be a groundbreaking approach to military human capital management and build a component that improves warfighting readiness with a consistent, coherent means to employ the force. Over the past 2 years, we secured a number of wins for our nation. I am proud of the more than 13,500 military and civilian guardians who joined our ranks from the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, as well as from across America. We launched recruiting initiatives to ensure we are competitive for the STEM talent we need. We instituted improved interview questions to help us determine the best fit for our future guardians and to reach into a more diverse applicant pool. We have finalized our foundational warfighting competencies that capture what all guardians will bring to the team, and we have developed occupational competencies for all of our uniformed space-powered disciplines. We are using a boot camp approach to training software coders, resulting in increased digital fluency and positive impacts to mission accomplishment. And we are developing a performance appraisal system with a more continuous evaluation approach that captures the inputs of subordinates, peers, and superiors to provide a more comprehensive and timely picture of Guardian performance contributions and alignment to our values. We are appreciative of the existing military compensation package, but with such a small, highly specialized technical force, we often struggle to compete with the high salaries commanded in the private sector. The Space Force needs a compensation package that not only recognizes the service of Guardians and their families, but provides the incentives necessary to recruit and retain these highly sought-after professionals. To that end, we are carefully reviewing all current incentive authorities and exploring innovative ways to retain talent, especially of our experienced non-commissioned officers. We recognize that attracting and retaining talent is not about compensation alone. It is also about providing a sense of purpose and an inclusive culture. We're actively engaging and involving Guardians at every step in creating and building our culture that recognizes the value and contributions of all Guardians, military and civilian. We believe that our unique culture and mission, with a new space component construct, combined with quality of life programs and a well-structured compensation package, will allow us to attract and retain the Guardian talent we need. Although I'm pleased with the progress we have made, we have much work to do in this third year of building our Space Force. We will continue to focus on our innovative approaches to talent management, developing leaders and warfighters, and we count on the support of Congress to develop and field this new component that will capitalize on the diverse talent of our nation's Guardians to secure America's interests in space and enable joint operations. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you all for your testimony. I'd like to start with Ms. Mulcahy, about the Space Force. Can you tell me what your complement is currently, how many civilian personnel and how many military personnel you have, and what's your goal?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Madam Chairwoman. Today we have 7,051 military Guardians, and we have 7,875 civilians. We'll plus up a little bit on the civilians to next year, and by the end of September, we should be at 8,400. We are still gaining some units from within the department. So, for instance, in FY23, the Space Development Agency will come from OSD into the Space Force, and we anticipate being as high as 8,600 military in FY23.
And is it difficult for you to retain the best talent because of things like lack of salary competition to vis-a-vis the Facebooks and the Googles of the world?
Yeah, so, thanks for that question, Chairwoman. Our concern right now is that all of our military Guardians, when they came over, took a 2-year service commitment, and those start to come up in the September-October timeframe of this year. So we're staying connected to our Guardians, and we so far don't hear or see the numbers different than when we were part of the Air Force and managing our space operators. But we are concerned because we know that the space industry is very lucrative, and that's where a lot of our NCOs do.
And you don't have a designated service academy, so do you receive cadets and graduates from all the service academies, and what's the general breakout of that?
Thanks for that question, too. This will be year 3 that we will have cadets come from the United States Air Force Academy. The numbers have been, this year we're planning 102, last year they were 106, so just about that number. The first year they were 96. This year will be the first year that we'll have 2 midshipmen come from the Naval Academy, and in working with the Army, it will probably be next year where we'll have our first cadets come from the Army.
From West Point?
From West Point.
I asked this because our first panel, we asked about the Cyber Academy. One of the things that Senator Tillis and I and members of the Intel Committee have worked on is the Cyber Academy for the civilian workforce, since obviously recruiting the top cyber digital talent, the best mathematicians in the world, is a tough order. But we have something like 40 to 60,000 open cyber and digital positions in the federal government today that we cannot fill. And so looking at our long-term goals, we believe that creating a National Cyber Academy, a 4-year degree for civilian workforce for the federal government would be the appropriate next step to fill spaces within CIA, NSA, NGA, Treasury, Commerce, but also Space Force. And so I'd like to know your thoughts on whether a National Cyber Academy would be useful to you to recruit at least your civilian personnel, but I could see creating coursework specifically designed for Space Force personnel, both military and civilian. And I'd like your thoughts on whether we should try to create that in this year's NDAA.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Chairwoman. Absolutely, we're all on the hunt for cyber talent. I know in particular our Air Force Academy has really increased in their curriculum what we are doing in cyber and cybersecurity. In our university partnership program, we specifically have looked at universities that not only meet what we're looking for in space research and space talent, but also digital and cybersecurity. The idea of an academy that would specifically be targeted for civilians, I think, is a really interesting one, and certainly would help us in the Space Force. As I gave you the numbers, we're about a 50% military, 50% civilian.
Yeah, that's
so I think that could be, yes, ma'am.
I thought. The other reason I suggest this is because we are going to use the current partners we have in the in academia that we already partner with through one of the NSA programs, as well as 2 other programs. One's a DOD program and the other one's a National Science Foundation program. These are very small programs where they will use existing relationships with schools like MIT or Stanford to basically have an ROTC style educational relationship. So you can be trained at these private institutions, but in exchange for your tuition, you will serve 5 years. Is that something that would be useful to the Space Force?
I think absolutely, Chairwoman. We, with the help of the Air Force, have established 4-year scholarships at some 11 institutions, 2 that you mentioned, in particular MIT and Stanford, and others that, again, will produce the kind of talent that we're looking for in the Space Force. I think that could be very helpful for the civilian side as well.
Grateful. I'd like you to perhaps collaborate with the work that Secretary Cisneros has been tasked to do with the Chief Information Officer in Section 1506 of the 2022 Defense Bill to opine on the benefits of the National Cyber Academy to train future civilian and military personnel. I would like you to submit to that review your views in writing so that they have the benefit of your thinking on how this could be of use to Space Force needs in the future. And I have questions for each of the witnesses today that I'll submit for the record that you can answer by letter because I have to go vote now. And so I will let Senator Tillis ask his questions and close this hearing. So I just want to thank you for your extraordinary service and for all you're doing for our men and women who are serving so bravely. And without your leadership and your absolute attention to their needs and their education and their well-being, we would not have the amazing force that we have today. So thank you very much. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. I have a general question for all the witnesses, and then I've got a few service line specific questions. I'm curious, Senator Hawley asked this of Secretary Cisneros, and General Odignon, you and I talked about it yesterday. Can you just go down the line and tell me the number of people who have been separated as a result of their refusal to get the vaccine? And if you have the information or even just can speculate occupational codes or series that have been most affected? And
thank you, Ranking Member Tillis. So I have those numbers. If you want, I can submit them for the record, or I can give them to you very quickly.
Just real quick.
We have separated 1,968 Marines. 71% of those were given a general discharge, so 28% were given an honorable discharge. That's total force between active and reserve. I don't have the exact number by MOS specialty. I can provide that for the record. What I can tell you is I watch that very closely. I can tell you there are no operational impacts across a force for readiness. There's no one community that has signaled an instance where a leadership, an NCO, or a young enlisted Marine is not present because of that. I think it's important to note that 97% of the force is vaccinated. The other part of the force that's not vaccinated, a large portion of that is in our enlisted training pipeline that's moving through the system. And the administration catches up behind it. So I think it's just important to note that as we go through this process, we would want every Marine to get a vaccination. We think readiness is paramount. The Marine Corps is a 911 force as you charge us in law. And so it's important for us to recognize that health and safety, the government compelling interest here is so very high for readiness and for health and safety of the force. And these numbers, I wish every one of these young Marines would have a vaccination. And as I mentioned to you before, the Commandant has offered an enlistment code for anyone that is discharged, the ability to return to service. If for some reason down the road here they recognize that they would want to come back in, there's an opportunity for that Marine to do that.
Thank you. General Brito.
Thank you, Ranking Member Tillis. We have 345 soldiers that have been discharged to date for refusal to get the mandatory vaccine. Of those 345 soldiers, 9 have received honorable discharges. The remaining 36 have received general under honorable conditions. I would like to know, similar to my Marine counterpart, 98% of our force has been vaccinated. We do continue to look strongly in conjunction with the Religious Freedom Act to ensure that no soldier's rights are being violated. And also, as mentioned in the panel earlier today, look at the safety, health, and welfare of the unit, individual, and the operations that he or she may be supporting as well.
Thank you, General. Has the Army also taken the position that the Marines have that if a separated service member has buyer's remorse, wants to come back, that they're welcome back?
We will certainly look at them, sir, within the context of the law to allow them to, through the legal process, look at the contents of the discharge. But yes, and I would not like to note that a thorough, deliberate process is conducted with that soldier, both in the staff and counseling, before he or she does make that decision.
Okay. Admiral Noel.
Sir, thank you. As of the 21st of April, the Navy has approved 798 separations based on COVID vaccine refusal. All of those, the characterization has been honorable. The way that we designed the process to get to a fully immunized force as quickly and as equitably as possible really provided that path. But we, like the other services, believe that vaccination remains the most effective way to protect the force. There have been no impacts to talent management, but I will tell you, as General Otnian and General Brito mentioned, we don't want to lose a single sailor to this, so we continue to beat the drum on vaccinations, and we're pretty proud that about 99% of the active component is vaccinated, sir.
Thank you. Ms. DeFilippi.
Thank you. Today, 287 airmen have separated from the Air Force. Of those, 281 have separated under general under honorable conditions, 1 entry level and 5 honorable. Like the other services, we're sitting at about 98% vaccination rate. The remaining service members are going through the process of having their request for accommodation adjudicated. The Air Force remains focused on ensuring that we're deployable at any point in time, and so we too are interested in making sure that those that separate solely for the reason of a vaccine are able to re-enlist if they are able to comply with our vaccination requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mulcahy.
Yes, thank you for that question, Ranking Member Tillis. We have not separated any guardians from the Space Force at this time. We, too, also enjoy a high 98.2% vaccination rate. And we, too, if we were to separate someone solely for the reasons of refusing the vaccine, would consider them, if they would take it, to come back into our ranks. And I must also echo that this is absolutely a readiness issue as well as it is just a health and safety issue as well.
Thank you. General Brito, does it seem reasonable? It doesn't seem reasonable to me. I don't know, maybe for various reasons, reasonable for you, that only 2 soldiers could meet the criteria for religious accommodation out of thousands of requests?
Senator Tillis, I would like to mention that we do have an extremely deliberate process to review both the medical and the religious exceptions for COVID exemptions. For medical, again, starts at the user level, the field level, and all the way up through the chain of command. And any exceptions are monitored through our Surgeon General. For our religious exemptions, the same, again, a very deliberate process, starting with the unit level leadership all the way up to the highest level if necessary for exemptions, and definitely in adherence with the law, the Religious Freedoms Act as well. Reasonable or not, I can say that we do have a very deliberate process to, one, make sure the decision is equitable to the soldier in accordance with his or her rights and law, and in accordance with the health and safety of the unit and the unit that they support.
Yeah. Well, it's similar to a question from Senator Hawley. It would be helpful if we can get just the guidelines or the rules that you go through that document that process. I think that would be helpful.
Certainly will, Senator.
Ms. DeFilippi, of the airmen and guardians who were separated, how many were already in the process of separation or planning to retire?
I'll need to take that for the record and come back to you.
I was curious just to see how much of that is adjusted for that being a likely outcome for some number. I mean, but to a person, you're saying that the numbers are not one, that the reduction in numbers do not affect readiness, that the lack of vaccine could have an impact on readiness. Am I hearing that right from all of you? Just head shake?
Yes.
Thank you. General Odignon, I'm sorry, I always flip the consonants. Can you talk a little bit about the talent management 2030? I know that the Force Design 2030 plan has gotten a lot of attention. You and I talked a bit about this on our call yesterday, but could you talk a little bit about it? And then I'm also curious whether or not you have the programs and authorities required to execute.
Senator Tillis, thank you for that question. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the Talent Management 2030 was in concert with the overall force design of 2030 that General Berger issued to the force. It's unique in a sense that we recognize that an all-domain, an ability to sense and make sense, an ability to operate forward inside a weapon exclusion zone, have the ability to be a stand-in force, provide capabilities that the Marine Corps would need for the future fight, would have to look a little differently in the way we look and recruit and retain our talent. And that's really where the Commandant kind of moved out. It recognized 3 big pieces to this, that we knew we were going to have to build and retain the right force. We knew we were going to have to manage it differently. We know that today's talent, today's Marines, we are trying to find ways to create that ability to have the transparency and options available to Marines to manage their career so that their opportunities are present when they need them in order to return on the investment to us later in the enlistment. And then finally, it really was a call to arms that we needed to inform and interface with our Marines, and it would require modernization of our IT systems. So it's a very comprehensive outlay of things that the Commandant has directed. There are 2 or 3 things in there, I think, that are evolutionary or revolutionary in a sense that are a different way to approach, that get a lot of attention, I think, in the media. The Commandant has opined that we are going to have to look at how we mature the force. Where does that return on the investment occur? Either is it upfront on enlistment, or can I get more out of a young man or woman because the amount of money and time that goes into the education and the exquisite talents that we think we need. The other one was an opportunity to look at how do we go after, as the chairwoman remarked, about some of the all-domain type of skill sets that we wanted. Could lateral entry, for example, where a Marine has the ability to move within the Marine Corps, or an ability to come in at an opportunity to the service where we recognize the authorities already given to us by Congress that allows us to assign that individual after they've gone through recruit training or officers candidate school, the opportunity to level into a job, let's say into cyber, what have you. This seems to have some momentum. We have internships with local universities. We have 18 students that will participate in cyber units within the Marine Corps, and we have 20 midshipmen from the Naval Academy that will spend their summer with us. So there's some growth in there. All of these things to say, Senator, is that this program recognizes the need to raise our bar in order to meet the challenges of what we think is going to be a highly complex environment that we're going to have to fight in.
Thank you. Ms. DeFilippi, the Air Force has undertaken several initiatives to improve the quality of your Exceptional Family Members program. That's something that I've worked with on Senator Gillibrand for several years now on this subcommittee. Can you describe the central assignments of the Air Force, what they're utilizing now?
Thank you very much. We're very proud of the work that we've done to take what was a very much a failing program and move it to one that is on the path to being successful and helpful to individuals. What we've done over the past 18 months or so is to take the burden off the members. So whereas they had to do 90% of the work to ensure that their exceptional family members could be cared for, the Air Force, through our central cell, now does most of the work related to ensuring that families are placed in position in assignments that can support their needs. We've done that by using automation to ensure that family members can enter information one time and build on that instead of recreating the file each and every time, and also by co-locating the specialties that are required to make decisions about how appropriate assignments are for families in the same workspace so that they can collaborate with each other to get to the right outcome. We'd be happy to provide additional details if you so desire. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that that's an area that's a good practice, and it's something that we'll continue to look at the other service lines to continue to build on that. But I do think it's a best practice that has a lot of potential to be replicated. Ms. Mulcahy, you recruit the service member and then you retain the family. Can you talk a little bit about what the Space Force is doing, particularly for military spouse employment and family support?
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Tillis, for that question. Two things that we're doing is when it comes to all of these STEM positions that we have in the Space Force in our civilian complement, we have quite a bit of direct hiring authority. And so what we do is communicate to our spouses that if they have their resumes in USA Job, when these positions come open, because they are direct hire authority and we are in contact with our guardians, we will just push the opportunity to them. This is a new program for us. It's probably just under 60 days now, and we've already had 2 successful use cases with our small force. So we're very excited about this and moving out further on it. On the other end, on more of the career end, with what we have learned over these last 2 years of being in COVID, we think that there is more opportunity to maximize certainly telework, but also remote assignments for folks and use of remote work. And so we are very deliberately looking at what positions for the military member to be going between about 7 different installations, and where perhaps there are opportunities that the family member could stay in the position and work towards a career by working remotely. So those are two parts of where we are very focused. And we know that, again, we recruit a guardian, but we definitely retain the family. And so we are focused on anything and everything that we can do to help our great family members.
I think not only in terms of doing right by those who are serving and their family members, but we get this right, whether it's exceptional family members, making sure that we have employment opportunities for spouses. This develops and General Odignon, it wasn't lost on me what you were talking about with what you are doing with maybe extending assignments and reducing PCSs. I mean, these are all things that can change what some people would conceive of when they enter the armed services. More friendly, family-friendly, more opportunities for occupations and careers for work members. We're working on some of the, are following closely some of the work we're trying to do with state PACs to allow licensure and certifications moving across state lines more efficiently. And all of those things, I think, are useful tools for the issue that I brought up in my opening comments. And we've got headwinds in terms of recruiting. And these are the sorts of things that can help make your jobs a lot easier. When you're the last person in committee and the chair gives you the authority to call the committee, it means you could talk forever. I'm sure the staff are hoping I don't talk anymore. But I really do appreciate you all being here. But this process, committees are good. But I hope, and I think I speak for Senator Gillibrand, as we're moving through the NDA process, as we're looking at more work that we can do, please be sure you're in touch with the committee staff and our offices so that we can do everything we can to make your job easier. Thank you all for being here. The committee's adjourned.